It is Monday, December 1st. I hope you've made your Christmas wish list, picked out which Timex computer you want your parents to buy you for Christmas, and hopefully it will land under your tree. Um, so at our last meeting, Adam asked, uh, uh, Adam, can you remind me what you asked? It was something along the lines of, the
Oh, I ask
history.
things all the time. So,
Right, right. That's true. But you asked essentially for like, the history of or the timeline of the development of the 2068 or something like
right. Yeah.
that. Yeah. Okay. So, and I think that came up because we had a conversation about some internal documents that Lon Hildreth preserved when he left Timex, and Lon was one of several programmers who was responsible for in essence, the operating system. Lon worked on things like the initialization. So when you turn your computer on, it has to go through this big rigmarole of, figuring out what's attached to it and stuff. And especially if you had a bus expansion unit, it would have to do its own initialization and then go out and probe the BEU to see what was attached there and it was memory and all that kind of jazz. So it built this. One of the things it built was a system configuration table in memory. This is not a thing that was a feature in the Spectrum. So this has been a part of Timex's improvements to the 2068. Um, and one of the other things that Lon worked on was the bit of code that detects whether a cartridge is an AROS or an LROS and does its little things. There was another programmer named Dave Boyle, and he was largely responsible for things like the bank switching software in the 2068. And Will Collum, who we've also talked to in one of our Zoom sessions, Will worked on the 1500 ROM and also
Poor
did
guy.
right. He's the one who introduced the bug in the 1500 ROM. Um, and then he also worked on a bunch of stuff in the 2068. And from Lon's notes, it looked like Will worked on implementing DR logo for the 2068, but this was my, you know, first uh, first time sort of hearing this information, reading this information, I guess, when I was reading through Lon's notebook.
Oh, is there
Oh,
not a logo for the 2068 otherwise?
no, there was a turtle something or other
Yeah, there's a Turtle Graphics that
graphics
came with it,
was on the
actually.
the,
Yeah.
the cassette,
Yeah.
right?
But that's not
But
logo.
that's not logo per se, right? No,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it actually got. I think it did get implemented based on what Lon wrote in his notes, but I'm curious as to why it never got released. Maybe a licensing thing. I don't know. It's very strange. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Where is that button? There we go. Um, there we go. How's that look?
It looks great.
Awesome. All right. I want you to know I spent hours upon hours working on this. Or
Okay. Well, I've got to go, so I hope other people enjoy it.
yeah.
I think you should have used the greater than sign.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Why am I getting okay? Anyway, um, so yeah, how Timex went from this, little black box on the right to this big silver box on the I'm sorry, the black box on the left, big silver box on the right. There we go. Okay, so a little bit of prehistory, as it were. Um, Sinclair started developing the ZX Spectrum in September of 1981, and Timex had not even started selling the Timex Sinclair 1000 in the US at this point. It wasn't until, if I recall off the top of my head, 1982 that that Sinclair passed this threshold. Sinclair, the contract with Sinclair and Timex was that once Sinclair had sold 500,000 ZX81s in the United States, Timex would step in and start, selling their version, the 1000. So, by the time people like me got a Timex Sinclair 1000, somehow I heard, maybe I read in magazines or something, that the Spectrum was, you know, out there, right? Because it was launched in April of 82, right around the same time that Sinclair had, crossed that 500,000 threshold. And in the space of less than 2 years, they managed to uh, sell 1 million of these little suckers. So, I mean, this explains, Adam, why the Spectrum is like so popular and
Oh,
so
sure.
pervasive
Yeah.
in the UK is
Yeah.
there were so many of them.
Yeah. Well, it was being sold only in the UK. That's not right, is it?
And
There was for the first year or so, yes, and then
Oh.
they were expanded to other markets, but I mean, they had a hard time keeping up with orders when they announced its availability. They were behind, there was so many or way more orders than they anticipated, and so they were behind. And then there was
Well,
this.
probably, I mean, I'm guessing people were happy that they wouldn't have to build these suckers.
You're right, right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Just take it off, plug it in, and run with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the first ones, there was never I mean, I know there was a 16 and a 48, but 16 was first and then 48 came later, or were they both introduced at the same time for cost wise?
that I don't know, actually.
Oh,
I don't know off the
okay.
top of my head. Um,
I'm astounded that they were able to design the Spectrum in what, uh, 8, 9 months.
yeah,
That's incredible.
yeah, yeah. So there's a whole lot of people that worked at the Timex Computer Corporation, which was this sort of subsidiary of Timex, the larger Timex, just focusing on building the 1000, getting the modem, getting the printer, all of the jazz, right? Um, and within that scope, there's a smaller subset of folks who worked on the 2068. And these are some of the names that you're going to see. I'll share this out in some way after the meeting because these are actually links off to, like, this goes to this page I have about Rex Naden,
Oh, okay.
and same thing for, all of these names are that are underlined link off to something.
I
Um,
assume we're looking at a PowerPoint presentation.
Canva.
Canva. Don't know what that
Yeah,
is, but okay.
it's an online app that does things like PowerPoint
Okay.
like stuff. Yeah. You can tell because of the high quality graphics that I'm using, the many, colors, etc. So, um, our earliest, bit of information we have is late 1982. Lou Gailey was working at Burroughs, and he was recruited to join Timex, and then he, in turn, started recruiting people that worked at Burroughs, and some of those people are Lon Hildreth, Will Collum, and Dave Boyle. They all worked under Lou at Burroughs, and when Lou went to Burroughs, he either soft or hard recruited him. Kirk Pond and Rex Naden were both from Texas Instruments. And Rex Naden was in charge of a fair amount of the aspect of manufacturing the TI 99-4A.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So, he was already, in the microcomputer industry. He joined TI in 71 and, worked through the process of, just bringing the 994A to market and, dealing with all the craziness. I mean, the original 994A had, a chiclet keyboard, and then that got, upgraded. And the original
Right. Yeah.
994A was really, really expensive. And that changed over the course of time.
Yeah.
So, we have those folks who joined in 82, and we also have, this is a thing that Lon saved. This is amazing. Um, Sinclair obviously had to provide the ROM source code to Timex so Timex could do their work, right? And Timex had a uh, at this point, um, this looks like it comes from a Zilog product called a microprocessor development system, and it's this big blue box. It's got 8-inch disk drives in it, bunch of cards, and you use it. Zilog sold these things, Intel sold these things, Motorola sold them, to companies like Timex who are going to develop some sort of product based on their processor.
Yep.
And you could, program in a variety of languages. In this case, this is assembly code. So anyway, this is the ZX Spectrum source code dated 11/23 of 1982. And they started, this is where they started to put their, stamp onto the code itself. And
Hmm.
so this is significant in part because prior to, this turning up in Lon's collection, this did not exist on the internet. Ian Logan and I don't remember the name of the other person spent a lot of time disassembling the ROM and then wrote this, book about the ZX Spectrum ROM disassembly and etc. Um, but Nine Tiles, the people who wrote the ZX Spectrum um, ROM, never released the source code. So, for Spectrum folks, it's a pretty big deal that this is available.
And you've released this now, or
Yep, it's
did
on
you?
archive.org. That again, this underlined section here is a link
Oh, okay.
to the document
And
itself.
people have already started looking at it, or
I shared it with the various communities, and
okay.
I don't know if they, really picked up on that. I'm not that much of a Spectrum person,
I
so
know. Yeah.
I'll go over there and I'll say, "Hey, I've got this interesting thing for you," and y'all can pick up the ball and run.
Yeah.
So, 2 months later was the Winter Consumer Electronics Show. It was so in January. Winter was in Las Vegas, and Timex brought this. They, decided that they were going to call it a Timex Sinclair 2000. That's what the little label says. Um, it looks a lot like a Spectrum, obviously, except that they changed on the Spectrum keyboard. There's this multicolored rainbow in the lower right-hand corner of the keyboard, and you can see that they changed it to these, four colored squares in the upper right. But uh, this was not its final form because um, this thing was inside, it was still a PAL Spectrum, and B, they wanted to add a cartridge slot to it, and obviously there is no space in this thing to add a cartridge slot, so some kind of change had to have happened. Sue Mahoney, who um, started out working for Sinclair Research. She came across the Sinclair computer, got really excited about it, and ended up working at Sinclair Research in Boston before Timex started up. And then she helped start the one of the largest user groups, which was this Sinclair Timex user group, which was a subsidiary, one of the subgroups of the Boston Computer Society, which is massive,
Wow.
massive
Yeah.
user group in Boston. And like the first meeting of the Sinclair group, there were about 20 people. At the second meeting, there were 75 people. And by the third meeting, they needed to find a freaking auditorium. And this is
Are you
all,
serious?
I kid you not. Yeah, it's really neat reading the early issues of the Boston Computer Society's newsletters. So
Wow.
she was actively involved in the BCS group, and then she ended up working at Timex as a community liaison kind of person. So taking advantage of what she did at BCS and trying to spread it out, across the country. So in January, she'd already been at Timex. She was in a position to bring one of these prototypes and show it off to
Now,
the
is this a prototype or is this just a reskinned like
yeah, it's a
Spectrum? I mean,
reskin.
it's
Yeah,
okay.
basically,
That's what I
because
thought. Yeah.
because it was a PAL machine that she
Yeah.
demoed, and that's not a prototype. The only portion I think that makes it a prototype is the um, upper shell of the case.
Okay.
All right. So again, in January, Gary Grimes was hired, and literally immediately, the dates on these drawings is January of 1983. He starts working on what is this thing going to look like, right? And this is the equivalent of 15 minutes after CES, and they're already going down the path of, it's not going to look like a Spectrum. So he did a bunch of these ideations, which are available. You can see them in much larger, higher resolution on the website, full of hilarious comments like "too much like the 99 4A." And you can't see it really well down here, in the lower right-hand corner, but it gives the overall dimensions of the 2000 in millimeters, and it's saying 310 by 185 by 31, and then comparing it to this early laptop that Epson brought out called the HX20, and it was nice little flat, what they used to call a slab top with a keyboard on the top, and the HX20 had a 4 by 20 line screen. These were the limitations we lived with back in the early 80s. Um, so, none of these are exactly what, became the final product, but it's really cool to see, you know, all the things that they were considering and the various, feedback. Um, so relatively quiet in terms of press. I mean, there's, stuff showing up in the newsletters, but um, InfoWorld had a little tiny mention of it, showed this picture. This picture's from InfoWorld, clearly the same unit with a black 2040
Yeah.
before they went with the silver color scheme. Um, and at this point, it was still a 16K ROM machine. InfoWorld said it was going to have no lowercase, which is kind of odd because the Spectrum had lowercase. Uh, But one of the interesting little things that I spotted was there was this magazine called Synchroset. It was a little half letter size, 5.5 by 8.5 newsletter. And in March, the editor of that um, said, he was perhaps the best at calling exactly what would happen because he said, don't expect to see this thing until the final quarter of 83. And most of the other press, newsletters and stuff like that would say, they would just move the goal a little bit, midsummer, second quarter, uh, but he's like, yeah, this isn't coming out until the final quarter. Um, and he's the only one that turned out to be right. But by April, Lon Hildreth, he'd been working Lon was hired in late January. Um, he had started working on ROM code for the 2060 or 2068. Again, that thing that I was talking about earlier, that when you turn the computer on, it has to find out what its features are, whether there's a cartridge inside, um, whether it's attached to a bus expansion unit. There's a lot of probing that goes on with that, and setting up channels because the Spectrum and the 2068 use channels to display content on the screen, to send stuff to the printer, to read the keyboard. Um, so this was an advanced feature that on the Spectrum side ended up supporting the ability to, for instance, open a file and write content, to write data to a file, like you would do on most other computers, most other home computers at the time. Um, Same time, this there was a draft document produced for the microdrive and its LAN and RS-232. The name of the person producing that is not anybody I recognize at Timex, and I think it's probably a Spectrum Sinclair document. Um, but by this point in time, they had decided on the names. And prior to this, there's a lot of in the popular press, there's a lot of confusion about the names. Is it going to be the Timex Sinclair 2000? You know, what's the 16K machine going to be called? What's the 48K machine going to be called? Initially, the thought was that the 16K machine that they announced would be called the 2048, and that the 48K machine would be called the 2072 because this was the sum of the RAM and ROM in the machine. And at some press conference, uh, Danny Ross sort of misnamed the 2072 and called it the 2068. And somebody called him out on that, and he says, "Yeah, this sounds better. Let's just call it the 2068." Literally, that's why we call it the 2068, because he thought it sounded better. So anyway, by April, right, uh, they solidified Gary's designs, figured out what this thing was going to look like. It's going to have the go faster heating vent ridge thing going on. Um, and the cartridge door over there on the right, and I mean all the way down to the labeling that would appear on the entire face there. Um, and so they produced this little document. It's like 4 sheets of headlines that you could just sort of copy either, like the camera, or cut out and stick into your publication for the 1500, the 2048, and the 2068, and then this line art for these things, which I've never
You
seen
mean
before.
Timex sent this out?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
what you
this
mean?
is one of their
Okay.
documents. Yeah,
Oh,
it went out with this price list that they sent out in late April. It was effective May 1st. So at some point in April, this stuff went out. Yeah, and you could have used this in a newspaper ad. This is the kind of, artwork that we would see back in newspaper ads
right.
back in the time. Um, Especially if a grocery store was going to sell it. It would be perfect for a grocery store ad.
Well, you're serious and kidding at the same time because I mean they were
Yeah,
sold there, so
yeah.
yeah,
Well, and
yeah.
it looks like newspaper art.
Okay.
It lends itself to that sort of low resolution that newspapers can do. So in May, they issued their press release about the features of this thing, that would have expanded memory and bank switching and 64 column and a cartridge. And they explained, you know, what happened between January and today. Well, um, they say, enhance the machine based in conversations with retailers and consumers. There were also some other issues, like the ZX Spectrum was not in any way going to pass FCC requirements at the time. And it's probably likely that, just coding the inside of the Spectrum case like they did with the 1000 would not get it within range. But again, when they showed it, they said we're going to put a cartridge thing in, in January. They said we're going to put a cartridge on this. So clearly they had other things in mind.
Well, it
They
was a popular feature of all the home. Well, I don't know about all the home computers, but so many of them at the
Many, right,
time.
right.
Yeah,
The Commodore, both the
yeah,
Commodores, the VIC-20 and
yeah,
64,
yeah.
the
The
TI
Ataris.
had a big old cartridge slot. The
Yep,
Atari home computers, yep.
yep.
I mean, the only one that didn't was an Apple, right? And most Radio Shack computers, except the color computer, that had a cartridge slot.
Right, it sure did.
So everybody's sort of competing
And
with
there were
like
a
a certain
lot of cartridges
strata,
available for those systems. Actually, unlike the Timex,
unlike
there
the
were a lot
Timex,
of
yes.
cartridges
Yes.
available.
Yeah, yeah. They did not deliver the real-time clock that we were promised. And weirdly, the memo, when it describes the sound features, it's exactly the same description as the Spectrum. There's no mention of the AY sound features, but by this time, it was already part of the design. So in May, Mike Brannigan came from Sperry to join Timex, and he was in charge of the hardware development. So the actual going from breadboard version of the 2060 or the 1500 to the PCB version, right?
And you
Um,
said you meant to say 2068?
I'm sorry, yes, yes, and both the 1500 and 2060. Um, uh, Another refugee from Texas Instruments joined, and his job was sourcing the hardware from vendors, technical liaison, that kind of thing. And then this system software design specification document by Dave, Will, and Lon that describes all the aspects of the new system software. And interestingly, this third-party software guide was made available in May, and this document, and this is, for instance, in this document, it does describe it does say that the AY is in there, and it gives the like 8 pages of the AY features, the AY sound chip features. Um, but stuff is still in flux at this point in time, and so the third-party software guide describes everything that they thought that they wanted, right down to port assignments and stuff. And for instance, one of the things it says is that the modem is going to use up 4 ports. As it turns out, the modem only used up 2 ports. Um, but this was necessary for Timex to get out because they wanted to encourage people who had written Spectrum software to start adapting it for the 2000. And that was the whole point of this document was you are, a person who wants to develop software for the 2000. We're going to give you as much support as we can as early as possible. And this document a lot of the material, the content from this document ended up in, for instance, Jeff Mazur's book on the intermediate advanced guide to the 2068.
So does that book also mean that there's stuff in there that's not accurate?
Correct.
Oh,
Yes.
that's too
Yes.
bad.
Isn't that crazy? Um, so this is, roughly the org structure of the engineering section of Timex Computer Corporation. So you don't see the marketing folks in here. This is all just the people who are doing the work. And so over here, where it's third one over where it says manager systems software, that's Scott McCourt. Dave, Will, and Lon reported up to Scott. They worked under him. Um, and Mike Brannigan is off there on the left. Um, the place where most people have seen Mike Brannigan's name is on the cover of um, the technical manual. Mike Brannigan and Carol Corcoran, who was in QA, compiled that after Timex shut down.
Which was very nice of them.
It was very nice of Timex to actually,
Yes.
do such a thing.
Hmm.
Um, so June CES hits. Timex goes to Chicago, brings along some, in this case, 2048s. It's kind of hard to see, or kind of hard to tell, but this image, you can make out that it's a 2048 and not a
Yeah.
2068. Um, but really, all they had at the time was that box. They had the case, they had the keyboard, they did not have the motherboard that went inside it. And so what they did, uh, Lon told us in our Zoom meeting was they had their boxes of breadboards sitting underneath the table, running these, providing the power behind the machine, which was pretty amusing.
That must have been a little bit more common than you would imagine because I've
It's
read
just,
in like articles and like from that time period where people would look under tables like the press would, to
Yeah.
see if that was the case. So it couldn't have been that unusual.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Exactly.
I can add something,
Yeah.
not Timex related, but in the earlier days of PC CPU development, the latest, greatest, and fastest was introduced, and it was a measurable more than what was common, say, like in the early 90s.
Okay.
They cooled it with nitrogen tanks
Nice.
in order to get the speed on stage, but without, the nitrogen tanks behind the curtain.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's awesome.
So they fudged a lot of PR.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's the CES was all about PR and trying to drum up interest in your product. Because if you didn't drum up interest there, you were going to have a real hard time selling it to, retailers. So when they showed this off, the feature set had sort of been finalized. Again, the cartridge, the 64 column mode, the same 256 by 192 resolution mode of the Spectrum, this 512 by 192 high resolution mode, the four sound channels, that's that AY sound chip, and the two joystick ports, which, if I recall correctly, go through the AY sound chip. I'm trying to remember the schematic off the top of my head. And so, a number of these features are, things that they added on to make the 2068 more competitive against the VIC 20 and the TI and the other machines in its class.
Yeah, going back to, can you go back to that page for one sec?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. The very last item there, the two joystick ports,
Hmm.
I think they had to have that. There was no way around it
Hmm.
because, like, I don't understand how the Spectrum, looking back on it even now, like, it had no joystick port, and make sure that you could plug one in, and it was a common thing that people did, but it didn't have one built in, and so everyone was using like the keyboard, that
Hmm.
wonderful keyboard to play
Hmm.
games,
Hmm.
and
Adam,
yes.
Clive Sinclair
Hated.
hated the fact that the Spectrum and the ZX81 were used for games.
Yeah.
Hated
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely did not want people playing games on his computers.
Yeah, if you put a joystick port on there, he would have gone full strat nuclear on you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. He might have stroked out. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. This is pretty
But that's what
he's
sold the systems there. So
the
yeah,
games. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And he just was not, I mean, he was smart in a lot of respects, but in that one, he totally missed.
Hmm.
He was not batting 1,000 there.
I think
Um,
I think Clive didn't want to be perceived as frivolous,
oh yeah.
you know. So
Yeah. I think that's a good call. Yeah. Um, so by June, they are getting close to being able to release the ROM. And of course, this is a big deal because, without that, you can't ship the computer. Um, so they had this software engineering release, and um these levels will. I'm not entirely sure why they did this in this way, but there's a reference to this a little bit later on. Um, so they had to work through these in order to uh, send it off to the ROM vendor to get it to do. And Sue Mahoney goes back to the BCS and says that these things are going to be shipped to distributors in August, which was reasonably close to accurate because in order to get them into stores by November, early November, you have to sort of, work backwards, right? And August was about as late as they could do it. So here's that reason that level thing that's bizarre. In July, Lon spent a lot of time working on this test spec for uh, this 5.0 test spec, which was largely about um, initialization, uh, and the features of the TS-2000 when it was connected to a bus expansion unit, because that bus expansion unit literally just opened the doors wide. It could have, RAM modules in it. It could have ROM modules in it. It could have disk drives. It could have all of this stuff. And each one of these things, you were supposed to be able to, um, the 2000, the 2068 would send out a little probe out along the bus, and each one of these things would respond with, this is what I am, and this is my feature set, and it's a whole bunch of data that would go into what's called the system configuration table. And one of the really quite interesting notes that Lon has in his notebook about this is it's possible to have more devices, uh, on the bus, through the bus expansion unit, through other units beyond it. It's possible to have more devices on the bus that can be um, recorded in the system configuration table, because it would eventually just grow. It would, if there were too many, that would grow up into the stack. So they limited that, how many devices could be listed in the syscon table, and we're, working on, well, what do we do with the ones that we can't find, or that we can't put in the syscon table? And it was essentially, we'll probe it when we need it, put it in the table, use it, and then maybe discard it as we're done working with it. Um, so uh, the 2068 is getting ready to ship to distributors, and everybody's still working full speed on things like, we've identified bugs, and we need to figure out how we're going to rectify those in you know in a future ROM, because the ROMs were socketed in the 2068, and the ROM is a specific address. I think it's like byte 13 or something, that records the version number of that ROM. And it starts at FF, and they were just going to sort of count down from there. But they already knew, in this shipped ROM, that there were things that they needed to add in the future, right? So there was the anticipation that um, future ROMs would somehow come from Timex. Maybe you would send it into the repair place in Arkansas, and they'd replace the ROMs for you or something. Uh, anyway, they had a VAX, Digital Equipment Corporation VAX mini computer that they did a lot of their work on. And one of the things that Lon was working on in August was writing a little program on the VAX to make cartridges. You give it um, the basic program or the machine language program, and it figures out all the little settings and generates the file, um, kind of like what some programs do for taking a cartridge and turning it into a doc file these days. Um, and it was at this point that this is kind of uh, a little bit of a showstopper. This is kind of a big bug, um, that there was a feature in the 2068 not present in the Spectrum, called the function dispatcher. And it was basically a jump table in RAM, with entry points to various ROM routines. And the whole point of this function dispatcher was that you could write software against the function dispatcher uh, functions, and know that the addresses in the function dispatcher were always going to be good, right? They might move stuff around in the ROM, but the function dispatcher was always going to be good. And so if you wrote your software in the right way, it would work against future ROMs. And they discourage people not to uh, write directly against ROM calls, um, except that uh, it didn't work with machine code running from a cartridge. And a cartridge was one of these big deal things that was going to be one of their sort of saving graces for this machine, was that we're going to bring out all this software on cartridge. We're going to encourage people to bring out all this software on cartridge, and oops, we got to fix that. So we talked a little bit about CPM. One of the things that from a very early point in time at Timex, they wanted to explore implementing CPM on the 2068. And the 2068 architecture, because and the Spectrum architecture is really not compatible with the way CPM works. CPM expects essentially 64K of RAM. I think the smallest that it will take, it's slightly under 64K. I think the most RAM that I've ever seen in a CPM image is something like 63K of available RAM. And the way CPM works is it puts its little bootloader way up at the top of memory. And when it boots up, it goes to this top of memory BIOS thing, starts doing stuff, loading CPM off the disk, etc. And again, all that stuff goes up at the top of memory. And then when you load something like WordStar or DBase or whatever into your CPM machine, it starts at address 0 in the Z80 or 8080 system that's running on. And the way that the 2068 works, its ROMs start at address 0. It uses the restart functions. The CPM does not use those restart functions. So it heavily depends upon restart 8 for error checking, for instance. And so part of the challenges that Lon faced were, well, how are we going to move this stuff out of the way to let CPM work? And so he spent a couple months on that.
Wow.
Well, he started in September, worked on it through the rest of the year. Um,
And that
Carol,
work that he did, is that included in the stuff he sent you or?
yep, it's all in his notebook. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
and there are some routines that he had to write for CPM that were on that green bar printout paper, and that those are scanned as well. Um, so one of the things that,
Just out of curiosity, you
yeah,
scanned that on a white, like how did you scan that since they're usually,
yeah, I got one of those, this really big flatbed scanner.
oh, just
Um,
especially for that?
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
good for you.
But it also there's some other stuff like the E. Arthur Brown catalogs were like newspaper sized and they were huge. And it's useful for scanning big stuff like that, bigger
Okay.
than fits on my regular flatbed. Um, One of the things, from the not from the very beginning, but at a certain point in time, we knew that the 2068 or the 2000 essentially was going to have 24K of ROM, and the Spectrum had 16K, so there's this extra 8K worth of ROM that they called the extension ROM. And what what we did not know is that Timex's plan was for that to be 32K. They had moved a bunch of stuff in order to put in the bank switching code and other things. They moved stuff from the home ROM to this extension ROM, and it turned out to be, just under 8K worth of stuff. Uh, but their plan was to eventually fill that up with the more features. So again, you'd need a new ROM if Timex had stayed in the business, and you'd send your computer in, I guess, or whatever. Um, and uh, again, at this point, they knew that there were bugs, right? This is a memo dated September 19th, and there were these bug fixes that they wanted to bring out, bugs in the shipped 2068 ROM. There was things that they wanted to fix and try to get out to release to their vendor by mid-November. So there's this memo that came out. They were working on that in September. In October, they finally decided that they're going to try to implement CPM and, in essence, everything on microdrives. Because up to that point, there'd been a question of, well, is it going to be disk? Is it going to be microdrive? What? So um, in mid-October, the decision was finally made that they're going to shift from floppy disk to micro drives, probably because it was cheaper. Micro drives are cheap. They're cheap, they're tiny, they're not great devices.
Yeah,
Uh,
Then
they're
floppy
cheap in
drives
many
were very
definitions of
expensive.
that word.
Thank you. Exactly what I was trying to be polite, but you got it, Jeff. Um, so meanwhile, 2068s are making their way to the stores from the distributors.
Can you go
Uh,
back to that? Because I would like you to, I just want to read there what it says on the right. It says, attached to the Timex microdrive operating system for your review.
yeah.
So, like, what does that mean? It was finished or mostly finished or like,
Oh no, no, no. This was a specification, and again, you can
oh,
read it online. No, no, this is the definition of what
okay,
the system will do, and then it was up to people like Lon to actually write the code to make that happen.
I see.
And
The
throughout
the
his notebook, hang on just a sec. Throughout his notebook, you will see mentions of this TMOS. That's why I put it in parentheses. You'll see mentions of this TMOS in his notebook, and that's referring to. Gustavo, go ahead.
thank you. No, Adam, I respond to your question.
Okay.
The source code used by Timex for the 2060 or the Timex microdrive operating system is the same code that the interface one of the Spectrum. Apparently, Sinclair
Actually,
share.
it's Gustavo.
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah.
It's absolutely not because they had so many feature changes between the Spectrum Interface 1 and the interface that they wanted to do that the Spectrum code would not have done remotely what they wanted.
But the PDF you
Yep, that's the
sent,
source code that they started from.
yes,
Yep, they
this
were
is the
provided
starting point,
the
right?
starting point, but they had, for instance, their interface 1 was going to have 32K of RAM in it in order to support
CPM.
CPM,
Mm,
and it was going to have all these other features that, again, in partly to support CPM, uh, that the Spectrum Interface 1 ROM was the Sinclair Spectrum Interface 1 ROM was not going to do it. They were going to have to do a fair amount of rewriting and adding in their features in, just like they did with the difference between the Spectrum ROM and the 2068 ROM.
no, okay, but it's in the initial working. But if you see the specs of the 2060, you have two ROMs inside. One is the boot ROM, and another is the operating system of the micro drive.
Yep.
It depends of you the switch in the beginning. You connect one ROM or another ROM,
Yep.
but the idea is the same. It's the same source.
Uh, Again, the same original source, but for instance, they were going to add random access files to random access, yeah, random access file access to their version to the Timex microdrive operating system, which is not a feature available in the Interface One. So there's a whole couple pages where Lon is, sort of talking to himself about that
Mm,
and how to add that into uh, what was going to be the Timex microdrive operating system.
right. But the problem for the random access on the tape, you need to forward all the tape till found the
Yep,
sector.
that's one of the things
Uh,
that he mentions that you have to go all the way around the tape,
yes,
at
it's
least once.
sequential access. It's not random,
Yep, yep,
except you have both dual advance and rewind of the motor, but it's not the case for the single capstan.
yep. That's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
correct.
So, and part of the point here is that, um, again, they were not just taking a Sinclair product and painting it silver. They were making it their own. And part of the challenge of doing that is it costs money, right? And one of the things that we've heard um, over the years is, Timex at the end they said we didn't think we could recoup our investment, basically, and that when they exited, they were something like tens of millions of dollars. Timex Computer Corporation was like tens of millions of dollars in the hole, and that comes from payroll and doing stuff like this. Um, so if you have
And,
not seen this,
and
watch
officially, when started the development in 83
of what
of the 2068 machine?
80, well, 82 is when they received the ROM source code from Sinclair, November of 82.
End of 82.
Yep, yep.
Hmm.
Because in order to have something to show at January at CES, you had to actually, you know, get somebody to mock something up. Um,
Wow.
yep. So one of the again, going back to the Boston Computer Society, in October, they in October that year, they had what they called this big celebration. And they invited all of these people to come and give talks about how they use the Timex computers. All these vendors came and showed off their stuff. And Danny Ross came and showed off the 1500 and especially the 2068. And this video is available. Somebody recorded this entire presentation of Danny Ross's presentation, and it's available on YouTube. And it's like more than an hour long. It's really interesting to watch. Um, the guy who's sitting there on the right is Bill Skirm, who was this marketing vice president at Timex. And after Timex, he went on to Scion. But he's the source of this rumor about a thing called a Timex 3256, for which we have no evidence other than what Portugal did. So, um, November, the 2068's in stores, and Danny Ross goes on, his roadshow to demo the thing, and you can see he's got the 2068 with the little cartridge door propped open. You can see a couple of micro drives, silver micro drives with probably those little micro drive cartridges sitting on top of them in the background. I don't know
Those are the
what that.
modems, I think,
I don't think
underneath.
that's a modem unless there's
No?
two of them.
I
Maybe
think
there
there's
are
two
two of them.
modems.
Yeah, okay.
It looks like that.
Then there's the cassette player to the just past the TV and a silver 2040 right there in the foreground. And of course, the reporter has a Radio
Oh,
Shack Model 100,
yeah.
No,
as you do.
on the micro drive, you have two cases. The top is the modem, as you mentioned, and the back is the micro drive controller.
Maybe we don't know here what that is for sure.
I see on the Boston presentation, in one of the part, the camera move uh, around this area, and
Yeah.
you see this is a blue connector on the case in the back. This
Hmm.
is a controller with the
Maybe. I
same
mean,
case
there
that
maybe
the
there is something plugged into the back of this 2060 or
yes,
2068 rather. There's
exactly. Yes,
a square
exactly.
box. It might be interfacing to but it's also could be the modem connector. It's hard to say.
Hmm.
We don't have hard evidence for this sort of stuff.
This is
Um,
a really interesting presentation. This is, yeah, thank you for putting this together.
so again, Timex spending money, like it's going out of style. They send Lon out to Monterey, which is where digital research, the people who wrote and sold CPM was. He takes a 2068 out there with them, and the whole goal is to meet with a couple of their folks, and he covers this pretty well in his notebook, to figure out, ask them questions and figure out, how feasible is this? How do we make it happen? Right? Uh, he was supposed to receive these two important files from digital research by the end of November, and he didn't, which leads to, his initial projected date to have CPM completed was the end of January, but because, stuff got delayed, getting it from digital, uh, that timeline got pushed back to March 30th of 84, which we now know is well past the expiration date.
Mm. One of the implementation most closest is the Ergo, because the Ergo have RPM, is a CPM third-party, and
Yeah,
run on the Timex side.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
to solve this, you need a run bank in 64K that use a dock to run CPM.
Well, this didn't use the dock. It used
64K in dock.
no, it used 32K that was going to be in the microdrive interface that would get mapped into the lower 32K. It wasn't going to be dock. It was going to be, one of its own um, memory banks rather.
No, yes, no, I mentioned the Ergo. No, yes, no, I know. Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, again, in November, they're still working on, making stuff available like this 64K column mode. This is actually the cover page to this application development library. Um, and these were tools that they could share with developers, and their own in-house folks to use the advanced hardware features of
David,
yeah,
anywhere in the documentation, does it say how they were going to, for instance, the application development library, did
yeah.
it say how they were going to get that out to developers? Because a listing would be, you know, it'd be cheap, but it'd be tough to,
Oh, the listings are long.
yeah.
Yes. No, no, they didn't talk about how they were actually going to get it to people. And most of this stuff was developed on the Zilog um, microcomputer development system, which, was a very expensive investment back. I mean, it's a good investment, but it was an expensive investment back in the day, and not something that an independent programmer, developer would have had. So I suppose cassette.
No, the problem is a proprietary
Exactly.
operating system. You cannot extract nothing except for the serial port.
Hmm.
Hmm. You need to connect
Um,
the terminal and use terminal to connect to the development system.
right. So in December, December 5th, Danny Ross was released from his job as vice president of marketing at Timex Computer Corporation. And Carol,
And that was just like 2 weeks after he gave that presentation at the Boston
uh-huh,
computers.
uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
Well, October. It was October.
October?
But
Okay.
it was like, within a few weeks of him, doing that road show and going to,
Right.
for instance, InfoWorld with all the junk, right? Um, uh, so, at the same time, uh, Carol and Dave wrote the software for doing 80 column mode, and then Carol wrote the software for doing 40 column modes. These were both largely to support CPM, but other stuff because that's what you could do with the 2068. And as um, the various reporting on Danny Ross being released said that he was going to stay on at Timex for a couple months, to sort of help them transition to the new structure, right? So 10 days after he's sort of been relieved of his position, he sends out this memo saying, "Hey, here's the InfoWorld article. Check this out because, uh, we got this excellent review and we should get this out to the bankers because, we're hemorrhaging money." I don't know if he knew that they were hemorrhaging money, but yeah.
Was this his attempt to say clear as they're getting the paddles ready?
Right, right, exactly. Yep, yep. Um, and again, still charging forward on working on these, various expansions for the 2068. In this case, the bus expansion unit, which was this device that you would plug your 2068 into, and it would give it all these additional features like microdrive interface, 32K of RAM, um, with that 1K of ROM that the CPM needed, that 8K of ROM that the microdrive needed,
Mm.
all these other features. And again, this was a nice document that Lon had preserved, and we didn't have it until he shared it with us. And they're still putting out these technical memos for the folks who are developing hardware and software. So if you were a developer, you could have gotten on this list to receive these technical memos. Moving into February, Lon is still
Wow.
working on CPM. February 22nd, Carol has committed the code for this thing called dual screen mode support, which is a feature that lets you load content into display file one and content into display file two, and then you can like switch between them to do animations or other things. February 22nd. And that date's important because that's the date that Timex went to the press and said, we're out. And that was when Lon, looked around his office, packed everything into a box that he could, and left. Carol and Mike Brannigan continued
So
to
are you,
work.
so no one at the company like who was working on this stuff knew this was coming? Did they have a suspicion or
Well, letting Danny Ross go would have been a clue that
yeah,
something was up, right?
right.
A reorg. But is the reorg, what's the actual thing that happens here? I think Lon mentioned that I'll have to go back to the meeting we
Yeah.
had with him, but I think he
That was a
mentioned,
couple of years ago now, right?
yep,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
2022,
Yeah.
that he mentioned that uh, you could sense something was up towards the end of January and in February. Question of what was up is a different thing entirely, but um, yeah, so that's where our story ends,
Con
at least for
concludes. Well, it doesn't
corporate
conclude.
support.
We're still here.
Exactly. Right. Right. In terms of corporate support, that's where it
Well, I got a
ends.
question.
Yeah.
If Timex is losing all this money and not making a profit, and they discontinue the computers here in the United States, why did they start up in Portugal then? If they're
Well,
losing,
actually, it didn't start up in Portugal. Portugal was already up. And doing the 1500, for instance, was a joint project between Middlebury and Portugal. Uh, uh, Timex, the folks at Timex initially um, wanted to just do a reskin of the 1000. They wanted to take the 1000 and make it silver to be consistent with, their new design scheme, their new design system, right?
It's
And
like,
they
well,
also wanted to put
Carl made
16.
that. Like, there's
Exactly.
a yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
They wanted to put 16K in it and call it done, right? And I don't recall exactly how the folks at Portugal got involved, but some folks in Portugal said, "Hey, wait a minute, uh, there's an opportunity to do some useful stuff here." Um, and so the version that became the 1500 is, in terms of the outer design, that's heavily influenced by Portugal. That was their recommendation. Let's put it in this case. Let's give it the rubber keyboard. Let's really improve this as much as possible, not just, you
well,
know,
if well, if they're making not enough profit and they're losing money in United States,
yeah.
would you say that the what do you call it, the salary in Portugal is less money than what
Oh,
they're
certainly the salary in Portugal was less money,
because if
but
that's the
also it was
case, why didn't they just continue with the Timex computer and move everything to Portugal?
because the operation in Portugal was very small in comparison to, the main operation. Um, and really, a big portion of this was the video game crash that started in the fall of '83, and actually Timex ultimately was the architect of their own downfall. So, when they brought out the 1000 for $99, this showed the market that it could be done, that you could build a home computer that was less than $100. And what started happening was Commodore, started responding to that and cut the price on their VIC-20. Eventually, when they released the Commodore 64, that was $595 to start, but eventually that became like $299 and even lower. And at one point,
Much lower. Yeah.
yeah, at one point,
Yeah.
Commodore ran a rebate where if you sent in a Timex Sinclair 1000, you would get back, $50 or I don't remember the exact amount. You'd get back, some money. And at that point that happened, the Timex Sinclair 1000 was selling for $25, $29, right? So you could make money on the whole transaction there.
Well, I think if Timex would wait it and come out with floppy drives, then they'd probably do because they're trying to compete with Commodore. And in that time of the year, well, just before this, in 1983, I forget what date, my brother got a Commodore 64 and with a cassette recorder.
Yep.
And then that Christmas, I think it was in '83, I think, or after Christmas, you could buy a disk drive for $159.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you have, it seems like, yeah, more software, more everything compared to what Timex is.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I think they weren't just competing against Commodore. There was a whole industry out there
There's a
already. I
whole
mean,
industry. Yep.
yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't just Commodore.
they made
And
all of them.
Yeah.
and then the Timex bringing out the 1000 also brought a wave of bizarre cheap computers from Japan marketed towards the US. TI looked at that and saw it cannibalizing their 99 4A sales and started working on the 99.2, which was this like downscaled version that was going to be monochrome. Radio Shack brought out the MC10, which was, this downscaled version of the color computer.
That actually came out though, right? The TI
That
one
came
did
out
not. Yeah.
before the 2068 came out.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah, yeah. So part of the problem was that, that they took too long with the 2068, but, ultimately it traces back to you brought out this computer at a certain price, and then you kept lowering the price of that thing, ostensibly
Well,
because
if it
your
hadn't have
costs are,
been Timex doing that, it would have been another
it would have
company,
been
I think.
somebody,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah.
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 Oh, that's a fun question. The problem is that Timex forced most of the other manufacturers to start selling things below their manufacturing cost.
Right.
And when the manufacturing cost they had to, and at that point it really so the question really though is would anybody else have decided, well, screw it, we're gonna, maybe sell the C64 below what it costs us to make it. I don't think that's necessarily a winning proposition for anybody else in that market. And that's you can say, oh, somebody else would have done that. Eventually the prices would have come down, yes. But the way Timex did it, they tanked the market. I mean, they really dropped an anchor in the swimming pool by basically setting there at 100 and, even or 150 and even down from there. That was ugly. That was mean.
The main problem of the Timex was not have a mass storage solution for the machine. because you have only the tape solution for both all
Well,
models.
I
Yeah.
would have to ask, which is it? Okay. From Timex perspective, they went down the 2068 route because they didn't think it was good enough to compete.
Yep.
Yet the other theory is that because the 1000 came in at $100, everyone else was afraid it was going to take the market. Yet it was $100 because it did the bare minimum. So, it was basically the fear of the others that this $100 computer that couldn't do nearly anything that the other ones did was going to take the entire market.
No, yes,
It
but
doesn't.
the development of those is the Sinclair CX81. The technology comes from UK.
No, I know, but I'm just saying feature wise.
Hmm. And
So
cassette
it just
wasn't.
to me it shows the ignorance of the market. Okay, because a computer coming in at $100, if that's what made everyone say, "Oh, the price of a computer is now $100," but it had no disk drives, it had no color, it had no sound, and all the rest of it. But clearly,
It had no keys. I mean, come on.
yeah, but if people but clearly lots of companies were afraid this was going to take some market because I guess people just said, "Hey, computer's a computer." Apparently, the market was a computer is a computer, and so
Yeah,
if this was $100, it must be as good as the one that's $200. Otherwise, why would they respond to it?
well, there
You
was some
know,
pushback on the TS1000 and the ZX81 a year or so after its release because people saw that it was a pretty limited machine. But I get your point, Ryan. I think the one thing that Timex really didn't understand, and a lot of computer companies didn't understand it, is that the machine is an enabling technology. There was really no software for the 2068 when you look at it. And if they leaned into trying to make it more compatible with the Spectrum, it might have helped.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think if they had come out,
This is a good point.
technical issues aside, obviously with FCC, but if they had just shipped the damn Spectrum with compatible software earlier on, they would have had many more sales. Granted, it wouldn't have been as capable of a device, but what they wound up with was something very capable, but it was for naught because it went nowhere ultimately. Well, I mean, very quickly. Um,
Yeah.
so you could argue that, oh, well, if they'd had the Spectrum software compatibility, but they wouldn't have had the mass storage. 26, I don't think the 2068 didn't sell it because it didn't have mass storage. I just don't.
No, no, because
I just
to
don't
your
think
point,
that's the
Ryan,
case.
the the Apple II has a cassette interface. All uh, um all the Radio Shack computers that were home computers have a cassette interface. The
Ataris as well.
Commodores, the Ataris,
TI 99.
TIs,
Yeah.
right? Even the smaller
Even the
oddball ones.
Heathkit was cassette at one time before they got but they were like $1,000. The
I'm sorry, what's that?
Heathkit H8,
The Heathkit's right.
they
And
were like $1,000 a kit for them, and they had cassette before they came out with floppy.
the IBM PC, when it came out, had a cassette interface.
Yeah.
You
So
could
when
buy
people
it.
talk about it should have had mass storage, okay, what they mean is floppy disk, okay.
Yep.
And what was the entry price for a floppy disk computer in pick your month in '83?
Well,
$500.
Yeah, it
yeah,
wasn't cheap.
yeah. And the floppy disk added a couple $100 to that.
Right. So I don't think a computer selling with cassette storage at a $200 price point is playing in that, and people, saying, well, I'm not buying this because it doesn't have a disk interface. And you could argue that, well, I won't buy the disk interface initially, but I want to see that it has one to buy later. Okay, maybe there's some of that. But they also had how soon was the press? How soon did the ads or the press release at least say that they were going to have they were working on mass storage
Well,
to have
Ryan,
later.
Ryan, with respect to what you just asked, I would plug an article that David has up on his website about the 2068 because it does address that issue, and the fact that some of the magazine reviewers, said that things were being planned like mass storage and
Yeah.
whatever, and you're right. I mean, there wasn't really anything there to buy.
Right.
I don't know why. If you read the specs of the 2068, the product specs, the initial document, include the description of the Timex computer. In one of the parts, mentioned the chip sound selector, the cartridge, and also the new basic extensions functions added to the original Spectrum operating system. If you think in the beginning that you need to modify the ROM, you create an incompatible with the previous model because it's impossible to add new feature with the same ROM.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. And this is one of the interesting point. And the second point is why you put a back connection bus with a totally different pinout of the existing Spectrum. Why? To do in incompatibility, because maybe you are stopped to the compatibility to, I don't know, stop export or put any condition to use the machine inside the US only. I assume that all the points in the beginning was to stop the compatibility with the Spectrum. Maybe it was
I don't think that's a safe assumption.
Oh,
Yeah,
no?
as a product, look, I'm looking back at my history as a product development engineer, and part of the problem I think is that Timex wanted to put their own stamp on this machine,
Mm-hmm.
and and so they didn't really much care whether the bus was Spectrum compatible. They didn't really much care, at least at the outset, that it was software incompatible. They wanted a Timex machine that was a step up from the Spectrum, and and they
Well,
came up with something that was nice,
they
but
they what they have said. They said Danny Ross said, and other things have said they they thought it wasn't bringing the Spectrum over like they had the ZX81 wasn't going to be good enough for the U.S. market, and that was the
Right.
market that they had done the agreement to take over. So they were selling in this market, and it says we can't just sell this in this market like we did with the TS1000. We have to have a better machine, and so I think speaking to this idea that they wanted to put their own stamp on it, I think that stamp, their identity they wanted to put on it was just simply we got to make this better to compete in this market, and I think they were correct about that.
yeah,
I think where they weren't correct was thinking that they could take time to do what they thought they needed to do and still compete in a timely manner. I think they lost sight of the fact that by the time they started selling the 1000, it was it was a very old ZX81. It had
Yeah.
been out since the end of that computer was released, not in the US, but it was contemporary with late 81. That's when it came out, as I remember.
Yep.
and that's
And
that's a fair point. the problem is that Timex, the ZX81 was a low cost entry level computer, and the 2068, they Timex had to decide what market segment they were going to be in, because they could have brought out a cheaper, upgraded version of the Spectrum, and pitched it to the low end of the market. What they ended up with is a machine that was pitched to the middle of the market, where there was a intense competition from Commodore and from Atari, and they're sitting kind of at the low end of that. But when if you're going to buy a computer and you say, all right, I've got this $200 Timex Sinclair, but if I spend another $50, I can get a better Atari or a better Commodore.
Or
So
why couldn't they do it like they did with the 128, Commodore 128? You want to make it a Commodore 64, you push the button and you can use all Commodore 64 stuff. Why couldn't they do that with the Timex?
Well, A, they
Something
were
so
not
you
big.
can use the Spectrum software, since you got all the software worldwide, and then eventually add more stuff to the Timex.
I think for one, they underestimated, um, the desire to run Spectrum software. You know, they demonstrated what they called their Chameleon, which was a Spectrum ROM that plugged into the cartridge slot and would let you load Spectrum software, off a tape, as you did at the time. But again, to Jeff's point, that you know at the time England was a world away. You rarely saw any of the English, computer um, magazines, because it was really expensive. If I recall correctly, the dollar was doing poorly against the pound for a long time in the early 80s. Uh, so, even for folks who could somehow seek it out and bring it over, it was a non-trivial exercise. Um, and, Timex looked at it and said, we'll bring out all the software. We've got these developers. We're going to give them the tools, and, they'll develop the stuff, and
Well,
we'll
also something, I mean, we haven't really talked about it, but like who would have thought in 1983 or 1984 that the Timex, or excuse me, that the Spectrum with 48K would still be talked about today, and not like the Spectrum 128 wouldn't have taken over and just demolished it and been like the replacement for it. You know what I mean?
right.
Like that it didn't work out that way. And like so the Spectrum kept going and going. It's freaking like the Energizer Bunny. It just kept
Hmm.
going.
Well,
Hmm.
this
And
happens. This happens to lots of systems. I think we talked a little bit about before. To go back to the mention of the Commodore 128.
Yep.
mhm,
We talked about how that was just its lot in life was a glorified 64,
yeah.
because these machines at some point, I don't know what the word what's the word is, that you know they freeze. Okay, they get big. I mean, Atari 2600, right? You would have thought that the follow-ons would have been only bigger and better, right?
Right.
hmm
Apple II, okay, reached a point of giant software uh, library available. Any follow-on machine's got to run all of that, right? Okay, so the Apple III, if it's not a really good Apple II, it's doomed,
Oh, but
and
there were
so
so the Apple II is a bad example because there were many, many clone makers who had either just stolen Apple's ROMs or at least figured out a way to more or less do the same thing. Um, and so there was a large variety in many different countries. I've got a Canadian Apple II clone um, that prints its own name instead of Apple every time you boot it, and things like that.
Yeah.
So there was such a different market in the Apple II category and in the PC category also, because those were also in the PC and XT era. Those things were cloned by everyone and stolen by everyone as well. Um, and the other thing that affects the usability of the machines is that in that era, especially, the curve of entry is much higher for your average person per computer. So you pick up a computer to learn to use it, you're spending way more time back then than we do today to learn how to use a computer, because computers today have much more standardized user interface and blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff, all of the
Yeah, are you
commands.
talking about across platforms? Is that
Yeah,
what you
Right.
mean?
yeah.
So I'm saying like the first computer you bought back then, number one, even if it was cheap, even if it was $100, you were going to use it for a while because you had to learn how to use it. And that
Yeah.
was an investment of your time and your energy to learn how to use the thing. You're not going to just go like next year, oh, hey, I need another one. I'll go get a different one this time. Because you'd have to learn how to use it all over again, and you spent all that time and effort.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember, you know, learning basic on one computer and then going to another computer and the basic, I mean, basic is supposed to be universal, and yet it kind of wasn't, especially when it came to things like file management. If you wanted to open a file on a cassette and save data to it, you know, everybody had their own sort of slight, different take on that. Or, discs or whatever. And uh there was a learning curve for sure. And, and the machines like the Commodore 64, which had no sound or graphics commands. You wanted to do sound or graphics, it's like, get bent, learn machine
Right.
language.
And yeah, right. In basic, that is. Yeah, it's poke, 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 poke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God, brutal.
Right. But the Sinclairs were terrible because they didn't have left, mid, and right string, apparently.
Right, exactly. Right. And that, so that was,
Because
and
the
Well,
criticisms,
the
I saw
Atari
so
was always
many of
criticized
those.
for that too.
I saw article after article and magazine after magazine that would criticize
the Timex.
well, any basic,
Yeah.
if it wasn't such a glorious programmer's dream, but no one used it. The reality was no one used the basic because in most cases it was terrible or useless,
Hmm.
and no one was programming. They would fiddle around. You only needed a couple K for that. That's why the 81 worked great for that. Okay. But to write anything serious to fill up 16, let alone 48K, no one's doing this. And so they're only loading games.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so the only thing that mattered was what was your game library like?
Yeah.
I feel
And
sorry for Dave. He started with the 1000 and it went to another computer. Now he has to spell PRINT.
Well, yeah, so I mean, to Mobley's point about learning basics. My my first exposure to the 1000 was that there was a stereo store that sold Commodores and Timex computers and whatever else. And I would go into the stereo store after school and play with the computers there. And it took me multiple sessions on the 1000 to figure out how to do a for loop. I got that you pressed F and you got the for keyword, and then I could, do the variable equals, the first value. But then when I got to the two part, I kept typing two, right? And I didn't, it took me a while because I also didn't have the manual. They didn't have the manual sitting out, right? But it took me a while to figure out that two was also a keyword. And it was such a breakthrough for me that I went to school the next day. I told my best friend, I was like, Lucas, I figured it out, you know, how to do this thing. And, I'd already been programming BASIC on mainframes and mini computers, and like we had Apples and Radio Shack computers and shit like that at school. So, it was really not used to this keyword thing. Um, and take that and to what Mowgli said, you buy a system, you learn the system, and then you want to go try another system, and it's like, a little bit wacky, crazy compared to the thing that you've learned. And, like Ryan said, um, the only reason that I would use left string, right string, and mid string was because I was typing in programs from the creative computing book, what it was like 101 game programs or something like that. Games, back to games.
Yeah, you have to remember how old we were.
Exactly. Right. This is my motivation in life, right?
I
Playing games.
mean, granted, I know some of our older members, were young adults or older at the time,
Yeah.
and not doing they're doing trying to do business things and not playing games all the dang time.
Well, Bob, Bob got his 1000. One of the things that he wanted to do with it was his grade book, which sounds like a very boring game, if you ask me. Um,
I think part of the big elephant in the room with the industry is IBM was going to come out with that PC Junior, and
yeah,
that was a
yeah.
different interface. So all the major players wanted to jump on the IBM bandwagon.
hmm hmm and interestingly, Paul, the IBM PC Junior had cartridge slots. So,
Yeah.
in theory, you could
Two of
plug,
them, I think, actually,
cartridge.
right?
What's that?
It had two, I think, right?
Two of them, yeah, right up front there,
Yeah.
and that crazy IR uh, wireless keyboard. Uh,
Well, I think that wasn't that because they weren't really planning on a hard drive,
I don't know. I have no idea.
and so that you were going to load a lot of stuff maybe off cartridge and then store your tiny data files on floppy. I don't know,
Maybe, yeah.
but
Anyway, thank you for attending my
but,
TED
ear-
talk.
but earlier on, when you talked about when we mentioned mentioned CPM,
hmm
um, well, and the software in general, um, it seemed like from what I remember, what Danny Ross had said was that it sounded to me like they were fairly confident in their plan for the porting of all this Spectrum software, and they had started that pipeline a bit.
Right,
That
right. That
I
was that
think
was.
I think the idea to me was is that yeah, okay, we're making it incompatible. We're just going to port all anyway, and it's we change some system calls and whatnot, and there you go.
Ah,
We're going to have to bring it. We're going to have to bring it overseas anyway, and like Americans do, we have to change all the spellings
Mm.
and the
yeah,
things, the
but
British things that we bring over apparently. So we were going to change it anyway, so we might as well, just you know we could change other stuff because we've changed the ROM, so it's no big deal. And
that
Yeah.
that
then
idea had to come from a marketer.
yeah, and then
They belong in the ninth
op,
circle of hell.
and then of course as the mass storage thing wasn't working out so great with the micro drives, well, hey, good thing we had the cartridges. We can lean into the cartridge software some more. And then, then, okay, maybe this. So, but even if we bring over the library of Spectrum software, it's largely games, right? And so I think that's when they started. That's probably what made them start eyeing the CPM. That someone said, hey, well, we got a Z80 here.
Yep.
We could bring over a lot of CPM software, and that'll take care of the business application side because all the Spectrum stuff is games.
Yeah, but they lost sight of the fact that they got to make money first.
Yeah, the bean counter shut it down.
Well, not only that, but I mean, fine, you can have CPM in 6 months or a year, but you have to make money in the meantime, and they could have gotten a revenue stream from selling games.
True. True. Um, can I change the topic briefly?
No,
No.
So,
maybe to support CPM, you need a drive system. That's maybe why Timex abort the
Wasn't that
computer and
what
abort the
CPM was for to
system
start with?
no,
with the
they were going
floppy.
full bore down the microdrive, as a CPM storage medium.
It's impossible if you need to.
No, it was not impossible. Go read Lon's notebook. It's
The
clearly
QL
possible.
had CPM
Difficult.
with microdrive.
I'm sorry, what?
But the
The
speed
QL had
is
CPM with microdrive.
Who?
The QL.
The QL. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's an interesting point.
The main thing you needed for CPM was a Z80 microprocessor, which
Yep.
it had.
Yep.
The rest of it, I mean, I got to tell you, from playing with a wide variety of CPM machines and trying to rebuild a bunch of them, CPM is one of the most horridly designed operating systems ever because it wasn't really exactly designed. It was kind of bodged together by whoever came along, and whatever machine, whatever hardware limits they had when they tried to put it on that machine, they kind of just worked around it. So there's no standard actual block size or sector size for CPM. It's all basically like in the hardware, it's kind of encoded that a sector will be 256 bytes or 512 bytes or whatever. It's whatever you decide when you're building your machine. And there's vague standards for how you do things under CPM, in that how you mark and allocate directory entries and how you mark and allocate blocks and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's like really just a, hey, you want to do something? Okay, go ahead and do it. For the most part.
Yeah,
So
but to be fair, the BIOS and the BDOS did tend to isolate the application software from all of that nonsense. And the biggest problem I saw with CPM is that there were probably 100 different CPM machines and 150 different disk formats.
Yes.
yes. Yep. Yeah, it was actually kind of cool in that it was designed to be kind of independent. You loaded it was designed so that basically the first block on the disk was the important one. You loaded it, and from that you could find everything else on the CPM disk that you needed to figure out like what you were dealing with. Um, so it's kind of cool in that it's like almost a modular operating system, that is that flexible, but it means that like anytime someone hands you a CPM disk, the first question you have to ask is what computer is this for?
Yeah.
Because if you don't answer that question, good luck being able to use it at all.
the only solution for this machine will be a cartridge with a program in CPM and
No,
then a fast
actually
copy
not.
to the RAM.
Gustavo,
Yeah,
I strongly recommend you go read Lon's notebook because I mean, yes, that is one of the venues, one of the trails that he explored was how much of this code was ROMable, but ultimately the solution was not going to be a ROM. Ultimately, the
it's
solution was
impossible. If
it
you
is not
run,
impossible. It is
see,
not
see if
just
you,
just because you can't imagine it doesn't mean it's not possible.
no, that is not the point. If you run a CPM with a floppy disk with 35 millisecond track to track time, SIC, it's impossible to use a tape with a 1 minute for track to track or sector to sector. It's
Oh,
impossible to run
No,
CPM.
no,
Oh,
it's
no, no,
not.
no.
No, not impossible.
the
It's
BDOS
painful.
and the BIOS would be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
CPM doesn't really care how fast it is. I mean, technically, if you had enough pigeons, you could make a CPM on a pigeon system, but you'd have to train them pretty well.
What the hell are
Well,
you talking about there, Mowgli?
Yeah, I think there's some abstraction that makes this happen. The solution for the multiple disk standards of CPM was IBM and DOS. The solution was Tim Patterson makes a CPM work-alike that goes
Yeah,
to IBM.
yeah,
There's one manufacturer, one disk standard, and that's that.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
yeah,
Well, and the thing is that I'm convinced that one of the reasons for those multiple formats was vendor lock-in. Because once you bought a K-Pro or whatever and that disk format, you didn't want to have to buy a bunch of other software.
true. Yeah, good point. Good point. All right, I'm going to forcibly change the subject now.
Good luck.
Good luck. Exactly. What kind of control do I have? So a bunch of us went to VCF Midwest back in September, and for me, it was awesome. Um, you know, I feel like, the rest of y'all probably had some kind of a good time, varying levels. And one of the things that I uh, you know, enthusiastically said at the end of that was, we need to do this again. And we we picked VCF Midwest because it's middle-ish, right? It's not the West Coast, it's not the East Coast, so there was the relatively evenly distributed pain for people who had to come from the furthest away. Uh, Having said that, there are other VCFs. Ingo and Tim are out in California, and um, we're already saying we should do VCF West. I was like, yes, some of us should do VCF West. And there's a VCF in New Jersey, East, um,
Southwest as well in Texas.
Southwest, Southeast, Montreal, as um, Francois reminded me today. So anyway, I have put together a survey. I sent it out to the group list today. I'm just going to show you real quick. Um, so basically, it's similar to the survey from last year for Midwest, except that let me reload this and make sure that I'm getting the full, because I put pictures in this one. Um, so when you fill it out, I want your contact information. Um, I want to know which one or more of these that you would want to attend, whether you want to present. I'm going to have to fill this in order to advance. So, um, yeah, pictures from there we go. So if you want to present, it'll ask you what you're thinking about. And if you want to uh, be your own table or be with us cool kids. Of course, I want to be with the cool kids, so I say yes. Um, do you want to have outside of the VCF activities, right? Some of us got together and had pizza, and then we had some sort of impromptu things as well that happened. So you can say, yes, I'm a sociable person, or no, I hate you all. I don't want to do that kind of thing. Don't force pizza on me. Um, and then the last question is, which of these ones do you think I should go to? Now,
That you should, as
yeah,
in you
I'm
personally?
already planning. I'm already leaning really strongly towards East, and I'm not going to Montreal because that's next month. Um,
How far is New Jersey from you, Dave?
it's about a 6 hour drive.
Yeah.
So it's not it's actually less than Chicago was.
Well,
Um,
yeah, for it's the same as me in Chicago.
oh, okay.
So,
Okay. So I'm planning on going to East. I'm planning on presenting there. Um, and then really it comes down to probably one other. Do I go to Midwest again? Do I go hang out with Ingo and
What
Tim?
is your presentation going to be on there?
Oh, it'll be the same. I'll just, set up a table full of stuff and say, "Hey, look, these computers are amazing. The people who use them are amazing. Um, you really should meet Adam. That sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
As long
he
as
can
you
He'll
say
send you a
give
that.
out
cutout
he'll give
or
out
3D
cards with
printed.
your phone number and address on them, Adam.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Call Adam. He's cool. So anyway, link to this is in the groups.io. There's an email about it. And I would really appreciate it if you filled it
But you
out.
said you emailed it to everyone,
I emailed it
to the
to the
list.
groups.io
Well,
list.
to the groups,
Are
to the
you on that
discussion
list?
forum. I think it was yesterday you sent it.
Yeah, yeah. So if you get the digest version of the list, Mowgli,
Oh, okay, yes. So I have to go hunting for it
it would be buried in
in the
that.
digest.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so anyway, tell me what you're doing because if you and I are going to be at the same thing, um, at the very least we should coordinate and hopefully there'll be multiples of us at the same thing. That would be really cool.
So the only other one that I have been to is Southeast.
Yeah.
And Southeast is actually held in conjunction with
The
the Southern Fried Gaming Expo.
I was going to call it Kentucky Fried, but yes, the Southern Fried.
Yes. Yeah, you have to be careful. If anyone's from the South, they might get a little twitchy.
Right, right.
But um so the expo itself is kind of nuts and insane. They combine arcade machines, board and tabletop gaming,
Oh
and
wow.
then of course, there's a small section of one of the rooms that is for the um, the vintage computer stuff.
Yeah.
But if you're into any of those, it's not a bad thing. And if you're into more than one of those, then it can turn into a like, how do I actually decide what I'm going to do this weekend?
Uh-oh.
Which one of these I'm actually going to spend time playing on?
That's cool.
They do, so the arcade side of things has like a massive number of arcade machines that are all free play for the weekend. And that, like, if you live down there, you can also buy them from some of the people. There's various vendors that will sell you all sorts of parts for arcade machines. Then there's the board gaming and tabletop gaming section that again has a whole bunch of vendors.
I'm
Uh,
missing the horse for my Monopoly, so if anyone has one of those.
There you go.
it you might be able to at least find a line on it there, or you might find somebody who's just going to sell you another Monopoly set. That is a
I got an
possibility.
anniversary Monopoly set for sale.
Uh, or Paul will sell you one.
Mhm.
Still in the plastic.
Right.
Wow. Okay. That's a little bit nuts, Paul.
Yeah.
Still for your sanitary protection.
Uh-huh. Um, so fun thing, I did run across the Oregon Trail card game there.
Oh
It
wow.
does exist. It is, in fact, actually more painful than playing the video game. We did play it.
You did. Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
I do not recommend buying or playing the Oregon Trail card game.
Is that the one on the Apple you'd always get dysentery or something like that?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
that's what I
You
thought.
you always started with like 5 people, and if you had more than 2 or 3 of them at the end of it, you were doing well.
Okay.
So Mowgli, you brought up a good point, which is that Tim Swenson is into war games. Like one of the things that he has written about on his website and has mentioned in various places is his love of this game called Ogre, which is
Hmm.
a tabletop war
Steve
game
Jackson.
Yep,
from Steve Jackson.
yep.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And he's written a
I'm
couple of his own games. And so if, for instance, there's going to be a critical mass of us in California, reasonably close to Tim, do we get Tim to like run a session or something? I mean, that maybe that's a side
Can
thing.
you learn those kind of games on the go though? Like
You
it seems like you
could
need
pick
to
it
know
up
how to play
enough
those.
to just have
Yeah.
a sort of pickup game. Hmm.
Okay.
most Steve Jackson games are, designed in general. If you've got somebody who's experienced, they can teach it to
Yeah,
everybody else, and
Okay.
everybody's going to have some level of fun with it.
exactly. Exactly. Um,
Yeah, last week my nephew was over and he's 22 and he came over to do some stuff. It doesn't matter what he was here for, but he had like about an hour and 15 minutes left to spare before he had to go. And he's like, Uncle Adam, we're playing Risk. I'm like, we should play it on the computer because we don't have time to play a full game. He's like, so we bent the rules, we changed the rules, and we fit it, and he completely annihilated. He destroyed me, and he's like, you've never won against me, and I'm like, you're right. And kid, so we're not playing Risk.
Yeah, try no shoot. There's a version of Uno that is really, really can be really nasty. I can't remember what it's called. Like No Holds Barred or something like that. Try that on them. But you
Okay.
you have to be a really ruthless
Yeah,
kind
I
of
just
player.
played Uno a few weeks ago with my neighbors, and they have like house rules. And I was playing. I'm like, I've never heard of any of this stuff. They're like, this is our house rule. I'm like,
Oh,
are you making this up, or is this really how? No, this is how we always play. I'm like, okay,
just
all
like
right.
Monopoly. Okay, so on that note, it's 10:55. Our next meeting, our official eggnog meeting.
Well, before we talk about the next
Yep,
meeting, can I
go
slip
ahead.
in something? I'll just take 1 second because I talked about it before we started. If there's anyone here who, at a future point, not the next meeting, but some other meeting, because I won't attend the next meeting, can talk about the high color mode, I would love to hear more about it, even if you only know a little bit. It seems like it's not well known about or something. So I'd love to see a presentation, even if it's 5 minutes long, someone talking about it, saying some games that are in it, something like that. I don't know how we can work that out. We don't have to work it out now, but I'd like to see that.
And we can just sort of make that a standing request.
Yeah.
We'll just put it at
And
the
the
end
reason
of
I
the.
bring it up is because in the groups it got brought up about Frogger from 1984 and the 2068
Mhm.
used not high res, high color mode.
I color, yeah, yeah. In order to get that nice, smoother, non-color clash
All right.
scrolling. Yeah, yeah. I thought that was interesting. And what's kind of interesting to me about it is that I didn't notice the
Neither
lack
did
of
I.
color clash,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't pick up on that key clue.
Yeah.
Um, all
Okay,
right,
so next
so
meeting.
Adam, you're not going to be here for our
All right.
next meeting,
I'll
which
be
is
in Austin.
on Sunday the 21st, right?
Hmm.
You'll be in Austin.
Yep.
They do have internet in Austin.
They do, but I also have family there. And my wife said, "Oh, you can go on the meeting." I'm like, "Yeah, well, it's okay.
Aren't we family?
Ryan
Yeah,
has
yes,
joined the meeting from other places.
that
He's
is
joined
true.
the meeting from like trains.
Planes and automobiles.
I think the only thing that, Ryan needs to go on a plane flight and then join a meeting.
We'll
Well,
see.
they got
It's not
Wi-Fi
that I
in
can't do
planes.
it. It's just that it would be impractical. Yeah. But it's not
Ryan
all
has
about
joined
me.
from impractical locations as well.
Okay.
Bars, walks in Hawaii.
Adam, you're just not going to win this one. Just
Okay.
you can just walk away.
Right. Anyway, so
I think you need to talk to a guy named Dell over there. He can hook you up.
L, yes, yeah,
Oh, okay. I'll do that.
Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 21st. Uh, bring your holiday attire. Bring your holiday programs if you have any. Uh, and
Oh, Peyton, that's
yep.
right. Are you working on one? Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, sure. I'm working on one. I'll have
Are
to.
you are you really? 2 weeks ago you said you
No,
would try.
I
Okay.
didn't get a chance to get to
Oh,
it, but hopefully I really
okay.
will get some time.
Okay.
Cool. No pressure, Peyton, but it would be pretty amusing if you did.
Pretty amusing. Why do you say that?
Just because it'd be cool to see a new,
Okay.
a new holiday program because it's like was one of those really ridiculous things that
It was, yeah.
that was get published in Family Computing and
Yeah.
you
I
know, I
think
think
Family Computing had one that was and it's probably available for the 1000 at least. That was a Christmas tree with like some presents under it.
yep,
It
I
was
typed
just,
that
yeah.
one in. hmm
Yeah.
It's kind of
Okay.
cool. Yeah, I'll show
If
that
you
one off.
say so.
I think we need one from our more southern members where it's, got palm trees or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or just an evergreen in the front yard with no snow. Yeah,
Yeah, I got,
brown
yeah.
grass. Well,
But it's got an evergreen in the front yard. I got an axe.
On that
Paul's
note,
getting into the Christmas spirit now.
yep, yep. Nothing says Christmas like Axery.
And the other question I had, Dave, about the survey
Yes.
was was the SoCal one in or out of that
Was the
list?
Southern California is
Or is that
I have
Ma-
West, but okay, so let me look up VCF SoCal. Because
Anaheim or
that's a different
I
one,
mean,
isn't it?
Yeah, that's
well,
in February though.
maybe
Oh,
it's not official part
no, it
of
is. It's February
VCF.
14th and 15th. That's too soon for me.
So yeah, there are actually other things that are not under the VCF banner, specifically the one near me in fact right very close to Paul is the Indy Classic,
Indie Classic.
which is in I think March, somewhere in March. Um, and he's been doing that for a couple of years now. It's gotten bigger every year. It switched to a new venue because he basically exceeded his previous venue. Um, and I'm going to be going to that one, and I'll be exhibiting at that one as well. Um, but that's one that I highly encourage people to come to as well. It's also somewhat central. Indianapolis is a little harder to get to, but it's still got a major airport there.
Can
Uh,
you send a link to the group about that?
okay, I
Because I'm
can.
not finding it real quick. But send an email to the list
Okay,
if you
it's
don't mind.
well,
Or chat. Drop in the chat
I'll drop it in the chat.
and I can take it from there.
Frank and I exhibited at one in the 1990s.
Indie Classic. Interesting. Okay. March.
That
All
might
right.
take the place of the old Hamfest.
Maybe. Arcade machines. All right, cool. I'll add this one to the list. Thank you, Mowgli.
Yep.
Cool. Um, all right. On that note, uh, we're done.
Bye, guys. So